here at one of my high rotation plots that has greenhouses, and I want to answer a common question, and that is, why do you choose to align your beds or greenhouses in a particular way, and is there a right or wrong way to do it? So I will speak just from my own experience, which I always try to do, and I would say, as far as greenhouses are concerned, yes, there is more or less a right or wrong way to do it, but there's always reasons to have exceptions. Generally speaking, in the northern hemisphere, and this would be the same in the southern hemisphere, is you want to have your greenhouses aligned running east to west. That is, the long side is facing the south. The primary reason for that is that the sun is in the majority of the time of your year in that hemisphere. So for us in the northern hemisphere, it's in the south, and in the southern hemisphere, it's in the north. So aligning your greenhouse east and west just makes sense that way, because the sun is going to change back and forth, but it's predominantly going to be down in that region, and that's the time that you're going to use a greenhouse the most, is in your shoulder season, and that's when the sun is going to be lower in the sky. So that's the primary thinking there. And so if you're near the equator and you're using greenhouses, you would actually run your greenhouses north and south, running north and south, facing either east or west. So the opposite of what we're doing here. And I don't have any personal experience growing in the equator, so I can't really speak to that too much, but I know that's how growers do that down there. And the reason being is that the sun is on equal sides all the time, as in, you know, there's very little variation near the equator from winter to summer as far as where the sun is. It might wobble a little bit back north and south, but generally it comes up east and west, and you have predominantly 12 hours of daylight year round. So running your greenhouses north and south makes sense in that context. Now, in the urban environment, or in an environment where you are dealing with physical obstructions, then there would always be reasons that you might change it. And this plot that I'm at, for example, here, these beds are running north and south. And there's not really a particular reason as far as daylight that they're running north and south. It's more just the logistics of the plot itself. And it just made the most amount of sense. It made sense for access, the way I walk in and out of here, and with just some of the physical obstructions. I have some plots that have beds that are running east and west, so it's not really that important in my context. As far as the greenhouses go, sometimes a physical obstruction might change where I place a greenhouse. Perhaps there could be a reason justified to have a greenhouse in an urban area that ran north and south, depending on where shade structures were around you, or overhanging trees or things like that. That really just comes up to the situation specifically. But for the large part, we're always going to run our greenhouses east and west in the northern and southern hemisphere. And the beds, it doesn't matter so much. However, there's things to take into account in how you lay out your beds, in that if you have beds running east or west, so the opposite of what these are, and you had things that were trellised on the south side of the beds, then that's of course going to cast a shadow onto the beds that are behind them going towards the north. And so those types of things are important to consider. And this is often why market gardens will, like especially larger market gardens, not mine, will have beds in blocks. So Jean-Martin Fortier's farm will have these blocks of beds, and then you might determine that certain areas of those beds are going to be certain things. So you're going to have these little groupings of crops, and you're going to consider where the shadow or the potential wind blocking of those crops are going to go according to your own geographical situation. Again, in our context, I want to have all my greenhouses running east and west, but if I were to say put a temporary caterpillar tunnel up in this plot, I wouldn't mind. I would put it north and south because that's the way my beds are running, but that's a temporary structure, so that's okay. The problem with running, say, a permanent greenhouse running north and south, if you're in the northern hemisphere, is that your end wall might end up casting a shadow that will actually leave an impression on the crops. So that's why we have our greenhouses this way, is because there's no real considerable shadow to be cast in a consistent way because of the way the sun is moving. Whereas if I had an end wall like this with a door, and I had that running north and south, then there would be consistent shadow cast by this. And so that would cause problems in your growth. Hope that makes sense. See you guys later.